How to Avoid a Climate Disaster by Bill Gates. With icebergs melting in the Arctic waters and 51 billion tons of greenhouse gases filtering into the atmosphere each year, our world is on the brink of widespread, irreversible disaster. As the planet evolves and becomes increasingly industrialized, cities across the globe are improving their infrastructures and bolstering their economies. However, this modernization comes at a price: the climate. When the climate suffers, we all suffer. Storms and wildfires start to worsen, water levels rise dangerously, and various species of plants and animals start to go extinct. In order to take back our world and the many resources it provides, humans must reach a lofty but not unattainable goal: zero greenhouse gas emissions. So, how do we get there? How to Avoid a Climate Disaster by Bill Gates provides a comprehensive look at the current reality of our situation while offering practical alternatives on both an individual and government level to the production of harmful chemicals that have become so embedded in our daily lives. Construction, food production, transportation, and heating and cooling are areas of focus in the text. Approximately 1/3 of the world's 51 billion tons of greenhouse gases come from how we make things. As countries become more and more prosperous, this number will continue to climb. However, if the pandemic has shown us nothing else, it has provided a sliver of hope. We are capable of producing less greenhouse emissions. COVID-19 has actually led to a short-term reduction in this realm. By implementing changes, and in some cases making sacrifices, we can still turn back from the precarious brink. We have until 2050, and the clock is ticking. How we make things. Construction. Gas, steel, concrete. The United States produces 96 million tons of cement annually, and each of these materials are produced in exponential quantities across the globe. While it can be hard to imagine life without these resources, their existence en masse is highly problematic. When buildings are constructed, massive amounts of steel and concrete are often required. In order for these materials to be used effectively, significant quantities of carbon and heat are needed. The issue? The carbon and heat is typically generated from burning fossil fuels. After all, heating fossil fuels is a cheap and efficient way to make steel. The problem is that 1 ton of steel then generates 1.8 tons of carbon dioxide, which is toxic to the environment. But it's not just gas, steel, and concrete. Other materials create sustainability challenges as well. Plastic and limestone, commonly used for producing cars and roads, both receive carbon from fossil fuels as well. The question becomes, what alternatives to standard construction materials exist? By implementing carbon capture technology, our world could capture and use carbon emissions from a power plant rather than relying upon fossil fuels for the creation of building materials. The downside is that carbon capture technology is expensive and underfunded. How we eat things. Food. One of the key contributors to greenhouse gas emissions within the food industry is synthetic fertilizer. Fertilizer contains nitrogen, which is not fully absorbed by plants, allowing it to escape into the air and cause pollution. Furthermore, creating fertilizer requires ammonia, which is produced by burning natural gas. Scientists are currently working on producing fertilizers that continue to positively impact plant growth without harming the environment. However, another issue related to food production is deforestation. In the process of making room for cattle and growing food, forests are frequently cut down. The act of deforestation accounts for 30% of the food industry's greenhouse gas emissions, while 70% is caused by plants and animals, as discussed above. How do we address deforestation? Action must happen at the government level as well as the individual one. Political officials must work to incentivize farmers to adopt new practices, including ones that are less reliant on cutting down trees. When trees are cut down, the surrounding soil erodes and carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere. Ecosystems are disrupted and biodiversity is lost. As consumers, we can offset some of the effects of deforestation by eating less meat, wasting less food, and patroning businesses that employ clean practices. We can also plant trees and community gardens and go paperless where possible. How we get places. Transportation. In order to grasp the necessity of emission reductions within the transportation industry, we must first explore green premiums. In various contexts, a green premium highlights the cost difference between current practices and the clean practices ratio that will get us to zero emissions. Across the sustainable transportation industry, green premiums are very high, which creates a prohibitive financial barrier and consequent impediment to progress. Consider advanced biofuels, commonly used to generate energy and provide heat. Biofuels are appealing in the transportation industry because they have the ability to work in today's automobiles without the need for substantial adjustments to a car's structure. However, biofuels are more than twice as expensive as gasoline and come with a 106% green premium. This means that if we wanted to completely replace gasoline with biofuels, the environment would be better off, but we would also be paying significantly higher fuel costs than we are now. And can we afford that? So, why not make all vehicles fully electric? Let's consider a city like Shenzhen, China, where 16,000 of the area's buses have been fully electrified. In a place like this, charging stations make it fairly easy for many vehicles to be fully electric, whether it's buses, taxis, or even trucks. This sounds great, except it is not always known whether the electricity used in these charging stations is coming from a power station that burns fossil fuels, as opposed to one that uses more efficient sources like wind. Furthermore, for vehicles that typically travel longer distances, like planes, cargo ships, or U-Hauls, heavier duty powering stations are required, and commercial charging stations come at a higher cost. That being said, the government is already developing the infrastructure for powering long-haul vehicles through a more standardized process. And let's not forget, harmful fuels are not the only concern with regard to transportation emissions. Emissions also come from pollution from tailpipes as well as tires and brakes, reducing the quality of the air. Lower-income communities are disproportionately impacted by these emissions because they have a long history of being situated close to main highways and other hubs. How we heat and cool. Reduction. Across the world, there are more than 1.6 billion air conditioning units in use. While you might think that the majority of these units would be used by countries prone to hot temperatures, they are actually more likely to be found in wealthy ones. As cities and nations continue to amass money at an unprecedented speed, more and more air conditioning will be required. By 2050, it is estimated that 5 billion units will be in use. Of the 51 billion tons of greenhouse gas emitted annually, 7% comes from heating and cooling. Mexico, Indonesia, and Brazil are currently the top purchasers of air conditioning units around the world. In order to reduce emissions created by heating and cooling, governmental policy will need to be renegotiated on a global level. Why? It comes down to creating a competitive market for alternative energy, like Germany and Denmark have done with wind and solar power. Because the governments in these countries have incentivized consumers to lean into alternative energy, green premiums have dropped significantly, making these new practices feasible options. In addition to fostering a healthy competitive environment, a few other methods must be employed to effectively reduce emissions related to heating and cooling. Worldwide minimum standards for emissions must be established. Incentives need to be created to meet these standards. Tax penalties must be given to companies that don't meet these standards. We need early warning systems for impending floods and storm surges. Homes must be more energy efficient. On an individual level, you can write to your elected representatives and ask that the resources be put towards funding and improvement in this area. And if you are starting your own company, be sure to build it with emission-reducing principles in mind. The main takeaway. By 2050, we must reach a point of zero emissions. Reaching this critical goal will require cooperation on a local, individual, state, national, and even global scale, in addition to widespread policy change across nearly every functional industry. Particular attention will need to be paid to the construction sector, food production, transportation, and heating and cooling, as each of these areas is a key contributor to the overproduction of greenhouse gas. Here's a breakdown of the current contribution by industry. Construction, 33%, food production, 19%, transportation, 41%, heating and cooling, 7%. Alternatives to these harmful pollutants do exist, but many are costly and ineffective. More research, funding, and policy restructuring must take place, and fast.
Hi, I'm Rhonda, and this is an exclusive audiobook video recorded for the Audiobook Master Channel. Enjoy your audiobook and have fun learning. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button so you'll get updated on our next upload. If you liked the video, give us a thumbs up and say your thoughts about the book we just covered. Do you want to listen to a summary or review of a book that we haven't covered in the past? Say it in the comments below or send us a message. Don't forget to check our other uploads. Enjoy listening!